Investigator Slater.
Tank.
You got to bring us in today. I'm
Really?
not here. I need you to pump me up. It's been 130 episodes, and I have to lean on you today to bring me to life because I am DEAD inside.
I got you, partner. Ready? Right, welcome back to another episode of the Psychopedia podcast. I am your itty-bitty but not insignificant co-host, Investigator Slater, here with my ginormous, tremendous macro host,
Tank Sinatra.
All right, how was that?
It kind of worked. I feel 1% better,
Great.
as they say. Yeah.
Listen, my mission for this episode is to make you 100% better by the end. The case is pretty brutal, so I do apologize on that front. You will not be feeling any better with that. So maybe we'll have some thought-provoking conversation that'll take you out of your head.
Negative 100%?
Negative 200%. It's a rough one.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Don't give me any details, obviously, but in what way is it rough? Just for the people who are about to listen as well.
It's infuriating.
Oh.
It's brutal. It's heartbreaking. And it's catastrophic on scale in terms of how many people were affected by what happened.
Oh my God.
And when I say by affected, I mean die.
Well, you know what? Anger is a high frequency emotion, so maybe that'll jazz me up a little bit.
Okay. Ding! That was me hitting the triangle because it's high frequency.
Thank you for that.
I went for it.
I thought you were calling me for dinner. You're calling me a cow. Whatever.
So listen, I'm going to guide us through this intro, if you'd like.
Sure.
Or did you just need me to bring us in?
No, I need another 1 or 2% before.
Okay, fantastic. So I will say that this case was actually recommended by a bunch of people, but when Tony Tennessee, our producer, put it on my radar in a very big way, I was like, it's undeniable. We must cover this case. So there's a lot that we're going to get into, and probably even more so we'll end up discussing it further on Patreon because it's a lot.
This is a multi-directional recommendation, huh?
Yeah. Usually when it comes at me from multiple angles, I submit. And I'm like, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, what is Patreon?
Patreon.com/psychopediapod is a place
Patreon.com/psychopediapod, you said?
Yeah. It's a place where we, especially Tank, he unhinges his jaw. He opens his mouth, and then anything that wants to come out just comes out in full force. I usually brace for impact. It used to throw me for a loop, and now I'm in it.
You remember that?
Yeah. I think I've told this story before, but I'll just say it quickly. It was like maybe our second Patreon episode ever recorded together. Mm-hmm. After we recorded it, I called Tank, and I was like, you can never do that again. You can never be that unhinged, that insane, that unfiltered ever again. Just kidding, because he went even harder.
Listen, it's my time to shine over there.
And well, now I love it. I love it so much now.
Is there anywhere that people can show us love or, subscribe to the show?
Yes. So glad that you asked. You can go to wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, and please subscribe because it really helps to, get Psychopedia out there more. The algorithm favors those who have subscribers.
It really does.
Yeah. You can leave reviews, which is also extremely helpful. And Tank and I, to this day, screenshot reviews and send it to each other. We read everything. Mm-hmm. So it means a lot.
By the way, let me just reiterate that. We read everything.
Yeah.
Okay?
So please keep that in mind. And if you don't have anything nice to say, maybe
You're not shouting into a void. You're shouting into my void inside and making it bigger.
Exactly.
Expanding it.
But yeah. And also on all the socials, right? So Psychopedia, Pod, Investigator Slater, Tank Sinatra, Instagram, TikTok, I guess. I don't know. This is your wheelhouse.
YouTube. Yeah. Well, speaking of Investigator Slater.
Yeah.
Quite a milestone you hit.
Yeah. I'm so pumped.
Do you want to tell them what you did?
Can you? Because I'm embarrassed now.
I want to add to it a little bit because you just hit 100,000 followers on Instagram, but you had 19,000 like a month ago.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
Not only is it quite a milestone, however long it takes, you have really stepped things up over there. And if you listen to this podcast, right, just for the listening pleasure, not pleasure, but because we quell your anxiety or whatever we do. You enjoy the storytelling or my sidebars. Her Instagram is really, really good.
Lit, as
It's a
the
lot of
kids
fun.
say.
It is
Thank you,
engaging.
Thank you. I have
It
it on
is.
video. Dave recorded me last night calling my mother to tell her that I hit 100,000 because she came over yesterday and she wanted to stay for the exact moment that it hit 100 because I was so close. But it got so late and the kids were like wigging out. We just had to get everybody to bed. Of course, she leaves, the door shuts, we refresh Instagram, and it said 100K. So Dave actually recorded, maybe I'll post it on Instagram when this episode comes out. Dave recorded me calling her and I had it on speaker.
And she was on your lawn?
My parents live across the street, so she wasn't too far. Exactly. So anyway, with all that said, I would just like to know, just going back to our Patreon discussion, if you have any Patreon names to read for us today.
You bet I do. You bet I do. Just some classics, like people really, I think, were going back and listening to some episodes.
Nice.
We have Micro Psycho, which is just...
Classic,
real strong. Investislator Gator.
Oh, I love it.
Doesn't roll off the tongue, but it does tickle the brain.
It does. I love it.
So, yeah, Investislator Gator. Nefarious Numbnuts.
Oh, I said that on, I think in the Korean Cannibal episode, I think I said nefarious numbnuts.
These people are out of their fucking minds.
Fantastic.
Winona Balam Hess.
Hi, Winona.
Give me your name.
I hope that's your real name. That's fantastic.
Of course it is. Winona Balam Hess. It's fucking sick. Fucking Pez Dispenser.
That's all you, Tank.
I know. Shout out to...
Alison Boita.
And then Cat Astrophy.
Oh, very good.
Her name must be Kathleen or something like that, but she did us the favor of remixing it in order to please us.
I love it.
For that, we say thank you.
I love it. Thanks, Catastrophe. Very good. Thanks, Tank. Any other ado?
I don't have any further ado.
So then,
at all.
Why don't you formally announce that you have no further ado?
Without any further, at you. Because that's what's wrong with me. I'm under attack by Mother Nature, who is just decimating my insides.
I'm so sorry. Oh, that was my story that I wanted to tell really quickly. My kids have been very, very sick. Combination of allergies, the flu, really not great. My little one missed an entire week of school last week. So he's very, very, very active. He almost never shuts down. And we were trying to tell him, Dave and I were trying to tell him, buddy, you're home from school. You should really try to nap. When you're sick, rest is best, right? So try and shut down and let your body heal. He cannot nap. He's just way too active, whatever. So we walked across the street to my parents' house. They were actually in Florida just to check on things. And I said, when you were little and we used to live with Grandma and Grandpa, when you were a baby, you had a tough time sleeping. So I would put you on my chest, you would listen to my heartbeat, and 100% of the time you fell asleep. And I would wrap a sheet around us both so you were firmly in place in case I fell asleep. And it worked every time. Come cuddle with me. Do you know what happened? He put his head on my chest and he was asleep in 45 seconds.
Wow.
It was incredible. And he napped on me for 45 minutes to an hour.
What a gift.
It was beautiful.
Did he wake up sweaty?
Oh, I was drenched. Yeah, he was too.
Having a little heat ball sleep on you is it's fun for about the first 5 minutes, and then it's
yeah, my arm fell asleep. It wasn't great, but it was also incredible.
Exactly. Well, I can't recreate what I did for the ado, so let's just get into this week's case.
In April 2023, the horror began with 10 shallow graves discovered in the dense, sun-scorched soil of Kenya. Then 20, 50, 100, 200. The numbers kept climbing like a nightmare with no end. Today, over 400 bodies have been exhumed from that cursed ground, most of them women and children. Many of the women post-mortem exams revealed had suffered devastating sexual abuse. And disturbingly, a number of the bodies were missing eyes, kidneys, and/or genitals, raising haunting questions about when and why these body parts were removed. This wasn't just a normal cemetery filled with the peacefully deceased. This was a mass, unofficial human dump site soaked in the agony of blind devotion. A place where faith was weaponized, salvation became a death sentence, and the mutilated remains of followers, or more accurately, victims, of a fringe Christian doomsday cult known as Good News International Ministries lie
I had nothing to do with it.
Thanks, Good News International Ministries.
Fuck that.
Lie buried in shallow, unmarked graves.
Terrible.
Because before they died or were murdered, they were taught that salvation required suffering, and that starvation, specifically, was a sacred offering to Christ. That if they surrendered their hunger, their bodies, their very existence in a world on the brink of destruction, they'd earn the divine privilege of being first to behold the face of God. So they obeyed. And in the end, hundreds were buried across a killing field disguised as a holy sanctuary. Of course, there was no rapture, no divine arrival, only unimaginable suffering followed by suicide, homicide, and filicide. Some people were buried alive. Others were strangled, pierced with arrows, hacked with machetes, or had their skulls crushed in ritualistic public executions disguised as cleansings, violent spectacles meant to punish doubt and enforce submission. And in the aftermath of it all, one truth emerged like a scream in the silence. The lucky ones died quickly. Because what was uncovered in Shakahola was not just a crime scene. It was a crime against humanity and one of the deadliest acts of mass religious indoctrination in modern history. This is the case of Good News International Ministries. Although I warn you, there is nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, good about what you're about to hear. So please listen with caution.
I guess I'll try.
Do your best. So I'd like to begin by giving you some context, because to understand how the Good News International Ministries, or church, sometimes it's referred to as Good News International Church, but really it's a cult, spiraled into one of the deadliest acts of religious extremism in modern history, you first need to understand the spiritual, political, and economic climate that allowed it to take root. Mainstream evangelical Christianity is a belief system deeply embedded in Kenyan society. Today, evangelicals make up about 20% of the country's 55 million people. After Kenya gained independence from Britain in 1963, traditional Christian denominations like Anglicanism, Catholicism, and Presbyterianism remained dominant. But beginning in the 1980s, a wave of American-style televangelism began to reshape the religious landscape. As economic hardship gripped the country, marked by rising unemployment and widespread poverty, many Kenyans found hope in the glossy promises of American preachers who took over the airwaves with their sermons, during which they offered spiritual salvation and material prosperity in equal measure. It was an appealing message for a struggling population, and one Kenya's then president, Daniel Arap Moi, welcomed with open arms. Unlike the traditional churches that often challenged Moi's autocratic and corrupt regime, evangelical leaders were more pliable. Some even proclaimed Moi was chosen by God, a divine endorsement that secured them political favor and freedom to expand. By the 1990s, hundreds of new evangelical churches had sprung up across the country, many led by charismatic preachers who wielded outsized influence in their communities. Kenya's president now, William Samoei Ruto, became the country's first evangelical president and built a place of worship in the presidential compound. In doing so, he helped cultivate a climate where religious influence seeped deeper into politics and public life, creating the perfect breeding ground for extremism. Cult leaders like Paul Mackenzie, the madman behind Good News International Ministries, seized that spiritual authority and perverted scripture into a weapon of control and devastation. So when authorities eventually reached the Starvation site tied to Mackenzie's cult, and obviously we are going to dig into all of this in detail, many of the followers who were alive didn't even flee. They didn't flinch. Emaciated, sunken-eyed, and moments from death, they resisted rescue. Not out of fear, but faith. They believed they were on the brink of glory, about to step into the arms of God. So let's take a closer look at Paul Mackenzie, his belief system, his warped theology, and the extremist mindset that turned blind faith into a mass extermination. Paul Mackenzie, was born in 1973 in Lunga, a town near Kenya's border with Tanzania, and was the fifth of 10 siblings, 7 boys and 3 girls. His father was a shop manager and his mother was a housewife. Paul and his 9 siblings were all raised as evangelical Christians in a tight-knit family. Paul was described as a quiet, obedient child with an early infatuation with religion. He loved church, sang proudly in the choir, and even gave guest sermons as a kid, preaching fire and brimstone before he was old enough to drive.
Father Hans?
Yeah, I was just about to give you an impromptu PQ and ask you, who have we covered?
Oh, yeah, I know. Have you ever seen the video of that kid doing the fire and brimstone, preaching on some daytime talk show?
No.
Oh, what is the name of it? It's not scary. I don't know. It's just unsettling.
Yeah. Intense?
It's intense, but it's unsettling that people would do this to a child. The kid was 8 or 9 years old and he's screaming about people going to hell. It's man, let the kid fucking play Roblox or something.
Exactly. No, I know it's tough because it has to have been supported and encouraged. Otherwise, how could it get to that level? But you do hear about people like Paul Mackenzie here, Father Hans Schmidt, who I don't know if it's natural, they're born that way, nurture or nature, or both.
Yeah. No, I think it's mostly nurture.
It's got to be at least a combination.
Yeah.
For this level.
For sure.
So at home, Paul Mackenzie would dance to gospel music in the living room, eyes closed, arms raised, lost in the rhythm of devotion. But his temper was a ticking time bomb. At 16 years old, after getting into an argument with another boy named Robert during a game of hide and seek, Paul snapped. He launched into a brutal, unprovoked attack and beat the boy up with alarming ferocity. And this is just one example out of so many stories of his childhood where he just went from 0 to 60. Paul went on to live with an older brother named Ramisi in Mombasa before eventually relocating to a coastal town called Malindi. As a young adult, Paul married his first wife, Agnes, with whom he had 2 children. He also left the local African Brotherhood church where he'd been preaching after he had a dispute with its leaders. Then, after Agnes died from an asthma attack, Paul Mackenzie remarried a woman named Joyce. Together, they went on to have 4 more children before Joyce passed away in 2017. Pop quiz.
Okay.
Prior to becoming a pastor, what did Paul do between 1997 and 2000? A, drove a taxi and hustled goods on the streets.
Okay.
B, was a physician's assistant at a diabetes clinic. C, sold miracle soap that cured both relationship problems and rashes. D, managed a knockoff Nike kiosk at a local market.
Damn, you gave me a D, huh? It wasn't even all of the above. A.
Yes, he did.
I just felt it. As soon as you said it, I was like, that's the one. I felt a little electric spark in my brain.
Divine intervention, perhaps. Mm-hmm. He drove a cab.
Courtesy of Paul Mackenzie.
I hope not. He drove a cab around the Palm Gardens area within Mombasa, which is a major coastal tourist destination, while also hustling goods on the street. By 2003, Paul had become a member of the Malindi Fellowship Baptist Church, and it was there that he quietly began sowing the early seeds of what would become his apocalyptic cult. Shut up.
Pop quiz?
Popcorn cult.
He's a pop quizalytic cult.
And of course, it didn't take long for him to break away and establish his own entire movement. At just 30 years old, while still living in Malindi, Mackenzie founded the Pentecostal Good News International Church, a seemingly humble ministry that would eventually spiral into one of the most dangerous and deadly doomsday cults in modern history.
No dong.
No dong. A thin man with bulging eyes, Paul Mackenzie had a temperament that could flip from tranquil to explosive in seconds, and we already know this about him.
0 to 60, baby.
Known for his fiery sermons, he initially ran his new church out of someone's home with unwavering conviction and urged his followers to reject television, sports, and all forms of government. He rejected Western medicine, called on parents to yank their children out of school since Jesus never went to school and Peter was, quote unquote, never learned or learned, and demanded unwavering obedience to his radical gospel, a gospel rooted in doomsday prophecy.
Did he go to school, this guy, I'm assuming? Of course he did.
Yeah, I think he went to private schools.
I'm asking a rhetorical question. It's always the people who went to school who get out and say that school's no good. We can't send our kids to school.
You have some thoughts about the education system and what people have to say about it, right?
I don't have thoughts about the education system, although I do. I mean, it's not perfect, but for people to graduate from that school system that they then go and shit on, it's like, how do you do that and not see the irony in it? Or at least say, you know what? I'm super fucked up because of the school system, but you're not. Because you're a successful person just talking shit. People just love talking shit.
Well, people do love talking shit. But I don't think it's wrong for somebody to experience something, come out the other side, and then say how it could have been better or can be advanced.
No, I'm talking about people who just like literally want their kids to climb trees all day and eat mangoes with their hands.
Yeah.
You want to raise animals, like legitimate animals? What are they going to do for work? Be a YouTube fucking, you know what I mean? Like,
listen, it's the number one profession right now. If you ask a child what they want to be, it used to be like doctor, teacher, whatever, fireman, whatever it may be. Now it is like across the board, influencer / YouTube star.
Yeah. The problem is there's not enough people to go around to compensate people enough to all be content creators.
Somebody has to go into advertising to pay those influencers. Somebody has to develop the program, the platform online for those Instagram users to go or influencers to go on and use and, promote their shit.
Somebody's got to be a psychologist to keep these people from snapping.
That too.
As well.
Exactly right. So according to Mackenzie and every other doomsday cult leader in the history of mankind,
Rocktario,
the end of the world was imminent, and the only path to salvation and union with God was strict submission to his God-given authority. Which is why when a supporter dared to accuse Mackenzie of pocketing donations, the crowd didn't question Mackenzie for 1 second. Instead, they believed him when he pointed the finger back and labeled the accuser a witch. And just like that, the tide turned and Mackenzie's growing following turned on the whistleblower, not the man bleeding them dry, too blinded by fear and faith to see Mackenzie for what he truly was, a corrupt con man cloaked in scripture. Riding the wave and preying on people's desperate need to believe, Paul Mackenzie soon stepped into the role of miracle worker, a classic move straight out of the cult leader playbook. One day, he prayed over a young girl mid-seizure, and just like that, the child stopped convulsing in front of a room full of people. Followers, including the child's own grandmother, swore that her epilepsy vanished overnight. Another man, a man with a festering infected wound, was brought before Mackenzie. After a round of fervent prayer, the man miraculously walked again, with the wound fully healed within a week. One of Mackenzie's earliest followers, named Joseph Katana, claimed that joining Mackenzie's church saved him from madness. You see, since childhood, Joseph struggled with mental illness and frequent manic episodes. At 24, his parents brought him to Mackenzie for spiritual help and psychological healing. Joseph lived at the church for 2 years alongside other followers battling mental health issues. And during that time, his arms and legs were bound, and he was kept confined to a mattress in the center of the main sanctuary, restrained, isolated, and hidden in plain sight. During church services, Joseph and the other members with mental health issues were moved outside under a tree to avoid disrupting the congregation. Still, Mackenzie regularly prayed over Joseph, and within a few months, Joseph claims he began to feel calmer. He could sleep, visit family without incident, and eventually even found work as a watchman. He rented a home for Mackenzie, who warned him ominously that if he ever left the church, his illness would return. "So I have to serve God all my life," Joseph said. Translation, he had to follow Mackenzie. These so-called divine interventions cemented Mackenzie's reputation as a prophet touched by God, feeding the mythos that he alone held the power to heal the body, the soul, and soon enough, the world. Now, I want to mention, I didn't write this down and I'm not sure why, but it was determined, it was like discovered that he was paying these people, I'm not going to say all of them, but he was paying many people to feign sickness and then feign him healing them publicly. By 2015, Paul McKenzie relocated his ever-growing congregation to Migingo Village while deepening his grip on followers who were eager for salvation. A year later, he expanded his reach with a television program, airing Judgment Day fever dreams that condemned everything from wigs to mobile banking as tools of the devil. But that same year, Kenya's Film and Classification Board stepped in and banned his TV station outright, citing, quote-unquote, radical and horrifying content too extreme for public broadcast. So in 2017, after getting married now for a third time to a woman named Rhonda, because remember, his first two wives died, which I think is suspicious.
Sus.
Mackenzie took things digital and launched, guess what? A YouTube channel filled with apocalyptic rants warning of the Antichrist embedded in everyday life. We've now done a couple of cases where YouTube was like a major outlet for cult leaders to just pump out their bullshit. Mm-hmm. In October 2017, the veil began to slip. Police in Malindi raided Mackenzie's compound and arrested him, his wife, and 19 followers. And what they uncovered was far more disturbing than a man just ranting and raving fire, fury, and final reckoning to consenting adults. Authorities accused Mackenzie of indoctrinating children with extremist propaganda so severe that it bordered on psychological warfare. He wasn't just preaching, he was systematically grooming an entire generation to reject the very foundations of modern life, including education, medicine, and even food. Under the guise of faith, Mackenzie taught that schools corrupted the soul with quote-unquote satanic agendas, chief amongst them the inclusion of LGBTQ topics in the curriculum. Hospitals interfered with God's will, and eating could be an act of spiritual defiance. No other authority could exist, not teachers, not doctors, not even parents. Only him. This was not faith. It was calculated isolation. By cutting his followers off from the outside world, he created a closed system where he alone dictated the truth. Mackenzie and his wife eventually faced charges for promoting radicalization and for depriving children of basic human rights, specifically...
Wait, hold on. They faced charges for promoting radicalization?
Yeah, they did.
That's great.
Specifically access to healthcare and education and with respect to children. Because in reality, Mackenzie wasn't just controlling beliefs. He was building a world where his word was law and where questioning it could cost you your life. At the time of his arrest, 93 children were rescued from the cult's compound. And he and his wife were slapped with formal charges, including, as we said, radicalization, neglecting their own children's education, and running an unregistered school disguised as a church. In the process, 93 children were rescued. Yet, despite the gravity of the accusations, Mackenzie was ultimately acquitted, a devastating lapse that allowed him to continue spreading his apocalyptic poison unchecked. By 2018, red flags around Paul Mackenzie were waving like they were trying to land a damn plane. But somehow, nobody thought to truly ground him. He was arrested again after local residents raised the alarm over his increasingly dangerous sermons. But as had become the pattern, following his arrest, Mackenzie was quickly released without consequence. Then, a year later in 2019, Mackenzie was arrested yet again, this time for inciting the public against the National Biometric ID program. So basically, the government introduced a controversial digital ID system called the Huduma Namba, which collected biometric data. Mackenzie claimed that it was satanic and the mark of the beast foretold in the book of Revelations, 13:16-18, which reads, quote, "It has also forced all people to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. The number is 666. end quote. Mackenzie was detained for 21 days, but guess what happened?
What happened?
He was released.
Oh, I thought you were going to say pop quiz.
No, sorry, I set you up for that, though.
You did.
That same year, Malindi Member of Parliament Aisha Jumwa publicly called Mackenzie out, accusing him of greasing the palms of law enforcement to keep his church open and his record clean. It's like, how else could he keep getting arrested, released? The implication obviously was clear. Mackenzie wasn't just radical, he was protected. Sensing the heat and the scrutiny of authorities mounting and whispers of corruption growing louder and louder by the day, Mackenzie closed his church. He then uprooted his flock and retreated deeper into isolation. And with a handful of diehard followers desperate for a fresh start away from Big Brother, he vanished into the brush and moved his operations to the remote wilderness of the Shakahola forest, only to reemerge not defeated, but reimagined. At this point, Mackenzie also apparently did which of the following things that cemented his followers' belief in him?
Here's the pop quiz.
Pop quiz. A, raised a woman named Mary from the dead, whom he then took as his fourth wife. B, predicted COVID-19 with his supernatural ability to see into the future. C, declared his front yard the Garden of Eden and ordered a follower, Joseph, who I mentioned earlier had mental health issues, to eat fruit from a tree, and then claimed that he'd removed his rib to create a woman.
B?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
You know why I was thinking that? I don't want to piss anybody off, but it was an insane claim. People were saying that the COVID vaccine was like a mark of the beast. Like if you got it, then they were going to know where you were at all times. Steve.
Who's they? Who would know where you are all the time?
They does not need to be defined. It's just a vague threat
that
paranoid people like to think about and throw around.
Got it.
Bill Gates was trying to put these things inside your body through the vaccine.
Oh, that I heard. That it was the government trying to inject like tracking devices and things like that. I did hear that.
Dude, track me. I don't care. Honestly, I don't give a fuck.
I have no reason to be worried if you do track me, so go for it.
I'm home 85% of the time.
I'm in bed as much as I can be. Like, it's very underwhelming.
Yeah. Oh, damn, she went to Starbucks again.
Mackenzie and his followers claimed that he'd been given the divine gift of prophecy and that in 2018, he warned them that a mysterious illness was coming. One so severe that it would shut down the world. And lo and behold, 2 years later, as COVID-19 swept across the globe and cities locked down, his prophecy seemed chillingly accurate.
2 years later.
To his flock, it wasn't coincidence. It was proof that their pastor had a direct line to God. Now on a secluded 10-acre plot amidst an 800-acre isolated forest, Mackenzie built his own version of the Promised Land and named it Bethlehem. The forest entrance lay at the end of a rugged dirt path branching off the main road roughly 2 hours from the nearest major town, Malindi. The heat there was relentless year-round, thick and suffocating, and every so often an elephant would wander through. Here nice. I know that part sounds pretty sweet. Here in the heart of the Shakahola, far from the eyes of the public and with no mobile network and no internet connection, Paul Mackenzie began reshaping his cult into something even more extreme. Followers were encouraged to relocate to the forest, build mud huts, and devote themselves and their families to daily worship in the new settlement under their God-appointed leader, Paul Mackenzie.
Do you know about North Korea? The power that obviously you do because your son is obsessed with it.
I was going to say I know more than you think because my 11-year-old is fascinated.
So they believe, they, meaning the citizens of North Korea, believe that Kim Jong-un doesn't have an anus because his body is perfectly mechanically designed to just process the exact amount of food that he needs to survive.
And it just processes and then never leaves. There's no waste.
There's no waste. His body is too clean to ever have waste to leave.
Why?
I just heard that the other day. I don't live there. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that they have some pretty crazy ideas.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not shocked to hear that that's something being taught and believed.
They think he's actually God. Like Kim Jong-un is like legitimately God. They have no contact with the outside world.
It's so unbelievable. It's really tragic.
It is.
So hundreds of people at this point brought their children and grandchildren to the forest, giving up everything and selling off their belongings in order to funnel the profits directly into Mackenzie's hands. One flight attendant reportedly quit her job, sold her land for nearly $50,000 US, and donated the entire sum to the pastor. Another elderly woman made a tremendous sacrifice by selling her family's goat for nearly $50 US, which was a very substantial amount for them, and handing most of the money over to Mackenzie. And we see this in almost every single cult, the built-in financial abuse and manufactured dependency.
Why else would you do it?
Leaders strip followers of their resources under the guise of sacrifice and sever their economic autonomy in order to ensure complete reliance. Because once your savings is gone, your possessions sold, and your ties to the outside world cut, there's no easy escape. There is only obedience. Now, no longer limited by outside interference, living in an isolated forest, Mackenzie went on to orchestrate, as I've said, this is now my third time, but I can't say it enough, one of the deadliest acts of mass religious indoctrination in modern history, because it's so fucking extreme. And when you really say it for what it is, I mean, think of all the horrendous shit happening, you know what I mean, in the world. Just for this to be one of the deadliest, I mean, I don't know. For me, it just consistently puts it in context. The forest was sprawling and thick with silence. Followers lived, as I said, in handmade mud huts scattered across communal plots called shambas in small, isolated settlements. The villages, many of which were spread kilometers apart, were given biblical names by Mackenzie: Nazareth, Jericho, Jerusalem, Bethlehem.
Oh, so he's doing multiple pop-up villages on his 800-acre or whatever it is property?
Correct. It was like
Bethlehem is 10 acres, right?
Yes, it's as if he was building his own twisted Holy Land in the heart of the forest.
Yeah.
Mackenzie, I should note, lived not in a tiny little, thrown-together mud hut, but in his own little village called Judea, on a large compound with 3 houses and a gazebo, residing in a grass-thatched home equipped with a solar panel, a fully stocked fridge, and a shit ton of Coca-Cola. He traveled between the various settlements in order to hold long, intense prayer sessions that would reinforce his control, one sermon at a time.
Can you imagine starving? Starving.
Oh, and we haven't even gotten into that yet.
And then finding out that the guy who's telling you that starving is noble is drinking fucking Coca-Cola all day long?
Unbelievable.
Oh, man.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Give me some of that Coke, man.
Yeah, you could probably survive on Coke alone, right?
Coke Zero.
So followers, I just want to sum this up at this point, were instructed to shut out everything: television, music, education, government, doctors, hospitals, and to cut themselves off from the world like a fading echo. They were instructed to quite literally vanish into the wilderness, unseen and unheard. It was around this time that Mackenzie unveiled his terrifying prophecy, and this is the first time he really unleashed it, and that prophecy was, the world was going to end. But don't worry, because he, and only he, held the keys to salvation. All anyone had to do were 2 very simple things: follow him without question, and fast, as in don't eat, as in literally starve.
Fasting is, I will say, a great spiritual tool. It's just self-deprivation. It's like anything, any kind of fast. Emmett Fox, this writer that I like, says the most important fast is of negative thoughts. It could be of anything. It's just like getting a fucking handle on yourself.
Oh, I thought you meant food fast.
Yeah, that too.
I don't know. I got to challenge you on that. I mean, I'm not saying that people can't experience like a spiritual growth during fasting. It's a part of like almost every religion. You know what I mean? At some point, every culture.
Yeah.
But don't you think, and maybe it's because I think too much, and that's why also I can't wrap my head around religion in general. I stand in the way. But don't you think that you get your spiritual enlightenment because you are losing it? Because you are losing your mind and you're grasping at anything and you're like seeing shit and like...
No, I don't know about hallucinating. I've never heard that before.
Well, not hallucinating in a sense like really hallucinating. I just mean like you're really out of it. You don't have all of your faculties. You're like...
I think that you, again, we've had this conversation. You believe that spirituality is this big thing that happens in this giant moment. And it's just not. It's like a little whisper inside that goes, maybe you don't have to see that way anymore. Maybe that relationship you've been struggling with you could see it a different way. It's not like a big circus.
I guess I feel like starving yourself.
Starving is, I have to say, any form of self-deprivation is good for character building. So call it character building, spiritual growth, whatever you want to call it. Any kind.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been fasting once a year, every year for 22 years.
But that's for a day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just enough to be pissed off.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's
There are diminishing returns, though, which is the first thing I thought of when you started talking about this fasting. It's like, and the same thing as the exorcisms that we speak about. It's like you have to learn how to you have to know how to use these tools
properly
to the
and
extent
safely.
that which they can be used. Because otherwise you're just applying you're trying to put a Band-Aid on a festering wound that this guy cannot heal.
I guess I'm wondering, respectfully, by the way, like I really am. Anytime I ever talk about like my questioning religious decisions, it's not coming from a place of disrespect at all. It's like true curiosity and like a true inability to grasp it, you know?
You're fasting because you're told that God is going to be mad at you if you don't fast. Correct?
You're told that he's examining and I don't do it for religious reasons. It's more of like a cultural, my whole family does it. I just want to be in it with them.
Yeah.
But the reason for it is that God is assessing the past year of your life. And by fasting for that day, you're cleansing yourself of any sin so that when he writes your next chapter of your life, which is the next year, he will write it well. He will give you a good future.
And do you believe that?
No.
Okay, so let me be on your side. That doesn't make any sense to me either. I think there's a big difference between doing it under threat of judgment and doing it to find out, who am I without this major distraction in my life?
It's not distraction. It's human need. Food.
For some people, it's not. Listen, first of all, going without food for a couple of days, not a need. People can go without food for a long time.
You can, but you start to lose it. Yes, well, that's a separate discussion. But you start to lose it. So you have to
Have you ever fasted?
You have to lose your intellect to like attain this religious experience.
Yeah.
Like, what does that tell you if you have to hang up your intellect?
I've told you 1,000 times, intellect and faith are they don't even know each other exist.
I know, and that's where I get stuck because I'm like, they should coexist if it's real. You shouldn't have to abandon your experiences in life that gave you wherewithal and knowledge to reach some other state of mind. And if you do, it makes me question the legitimacy. Respectfully, I swear.
If you're a good mechanic, you should know how to paint. It's just not how things work. There are separate entities that make us up as a whole. All of us. Different pieces of us. And we all have different pieces, thank God. Otherwise, we'd all be the same.
But you don't have to hang up being a mechanic to become a painter.
They're just two different forms of intelligence.
Right, but it's almost like they can't coexist.
It's not that they can't, they just don't.
That's where I am stuck.
There is no can't. It's like, just realistically, if someone is called to the arts, they're not going to become a plumber. And if they do, they're going to be miserable.
Right. Which, okay, so maybe I'm understanding something, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means if you can't get there, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm having not an existential crisis right now. Something's happening.
Oh my God.
So these people were told that fasting was the path to glory because by starving their bodies, they would draw closer to Christ as the world around them quite literally fell apart. So we got salvation from a looming apocalypse, making followers financially dependent, performing so-called miracles, cutting followers off from the outside world, and now depriving them of food. If that checklist sounds familiar, it's because it is. These are the textbook tools of cult control: faith weaponized, autonomy stripped, and basic needs exploited. Just like Jim Jones rationing food and meds at Jonestown, or Heaven's Gate members surrendering all earthly possessions before their quote-unquote ascension, the blueprint is always the same. Promise salvation, create dependency, and break the body to own the soul.
Damn, you should start a cult for real.
A true crime cult.
You know how to do it.
I mean, I'm a true believer.
Man.
Fasting soon turned into total starvation. At first, followers were given 2 slices of bread and a cup of tea every day. After 3 weeks, people were told by Mackenzie that there would be no more food, period. Because the goal at this point was for followers to intentionally starve to death in order to meet Jesus in heaven.
Oh, that's crazy.
Mackenzie explained to his followers that the children would be the first to starve to death, then the women, then the men. Whether you want to or not, there is no one who is going home, he said. You're going to be buried here.
What the fuck?
I know. Obviously, that was a quote. Children were forced to wear sinister death cloths or death clothes, garments that not only symbolized their grim fate, but were also twisted into something even more unsettling, and that was wedding attire. Because in the forest, a quote-unquote wedding took place every single time someone starved to death, or after Paul Mackenzie would select someone to actually murder. Only a handful of leaders, family members, and enforcers would attend these quote-unquote weddings, during which the ceremony, bizarrely joyful, would feature songs that celebrated the deceased's supposed ascension to heaven. Afterward, all traces of the person's existence would be burned, and mourning was forbidden. So you see what's happening here? He's requiring these children to wear clothes that they're essentially going to be buried in, because it's also a wedding. That they're gonna, it's so terrifying.
Did anyone, any reports on what the kids' vibe was at that time? Like, were
Keep in mind, the kids were there with their parents.
Yeah.
So as a kid, right, you don't typically question your parents. That said, yeah, there were kids who, which we're gonna get into, who wound up, thank God, escaping and testifying and saying how they tried to sneak in a piece of food here, a piece of food there. They watched their siblings die. I mean, absolute hell on earth.
And this actually happened, to keep in mind.
And recently.
Yeah.
So where the hell did Paul Mackenzie even get these ideas? Yes, he was raised in an evangelical household, but this was something else entirely. Well, it's possible that Mackenzie drew inspiration from the teachings of an American evangelist from the 1950s and 60s named William Branham, as Kenyan investigators later found copies of William's messages on the compound. So William Branham was known for his apocalyptic sermons and railed against modern medicine and formal education while promoting extreme fasting as a means to unlock quote-unquote atomic power, a phrase that he used to describe intense spiritual strength. Pop quiz. Which of the following statements is true about William Branham, a preacher who may have influenced Paul Mackenzie? A, he once gave an entire sermon about meat inspectors hiding microchips in ground beef. B, he preached that shaking hands with non-believers would, quote-unquote, transfer spiritual decay and therefore required followers to wear gloves out in public. C, he mentored cult leader Jim Jones prior to the Jonestown massacre that claimed over 900 lives.
A?
No, I made that up.
Fucked up.
Yeah.
B?
No, I made that up.
Oh, cool. So I guess what the point we're at right now is that
let me see if your
only one choice.
Deductive reasoning skills, how sharp
D.
are they? Not very sharp. C, he apparently mentored Jim Jones prior to the Jonestown massacre. And this is the guy who is believed to have strongly influenced Paul Mackenzie. Understandably, by this point, some followers wanted out of the Good News International Ministries. But Paul Mackenzie had no intention of letting anyone leave. So he built a violent internal militia armed with machetes, hammers, and knives who patrolled the cult's villages like prison guards. Escape wasn't just discouraged, it was punishable by death. Anyone who tried was hunted down, tortured, and/or killed. Of course, the men working security were paid well and ate meals of meat, rice, and ugali, which is a maize dish. If they recruited a group of between 10 and 20 people into the cult, they could receive a bonus of $4 to $17.
Oh, my God.
Moreover, security officers were also paid for killing. For example, if they strangled a victim to death in church, they were given money because it was seen as a sacrifice to Paul Mackenzie himself.
Wow.
At the helm of this terror squad was Mackenzie's head of security, a former hotel accountant named Smart Mwakalama, described by survivors as a quote-unquote heartless animal. He handpicked victims, mostly women and children, fucking pussy, to publicly strangle as a warning to the rest. He ordered rapes, though never committed them himself because he had a wife. And soon, the bodies began to pile up, dumped in shallow graves, left to rot in the open as a grotesque message, try and leave, and this is your fate. At the end of 2022, Mwakalama ordered his top deputy to hand over one of his own children for sacrifice, just as Mwakalama had done with his own children, because incredibly, heartbreakingly, not one of his children made it out of the forest alive. What began as a place of worship had now officially morphed into a sealed prison camp of fear, control, and violence, another classic cult pivot where the promise of heaven turned into a living hell. And Mackenzie's promise of heaven wasn't just spiritual background noise. It was the driving force behind everything. Every sermon, every rule, every escalating demand for blind obedience was fueled by one chilling belief: that the clock was ticking, and the only way to reach God when the world ended, and it was ending, was to starve to death. According to him, the apocalypse was coming in June 2023. Pop quiz.
Okay.
When a predicted doomsday fails to occur in a cult, what typically happens? A, followers often double down on their beliefs rather than abandon them, a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance reduction. B, the leader often turns physically violent, a phenomenon known as prophetic aggression. C, the leader reframes the failed prophecy as a spiritual test of faith, a tactic known as redemptive repositioning.
So, we've already done this pop quiz, and the answer is C.
You're wrong. I made that up, you fuck.
And you lied the other time.
There is no such thing as redemptive repositioning.
You said in whatever episode it was that what happens after a date is missed is that the preacher says, hey, I had the wrong date. This is actually the date. They reframe it as a misinterpretation of God's word.
So
in their brain.
it's not typical. I think that was the Rock Terrio cult. I think
they missed a lot of dates.
They
right?
missed a lot of dates, and I think he kept saying, I was looking at the celestial calendar. I'm supposed to look at the earth calendar. Yeah, but the typical thing that occurs when a predicted doomsday fails to occur in a doomsday cult is followers just double down on their beliefs rather than abandoning them. Like they go even harder.
So then my next choice is A.
Very good. Cognitive dissonance reduction. Like many doomsday cult leaders before him, and I'm sure sadly many after him, Mackenzie understood that if you control the narrative of death, you control everything.
Sure.
When death becomes a doorway rather than an ending, it becomes alarmingly easy to justify anything: starvation, isolation, mass graves filled with children. Somehow, Mackenzie took it even further, because in his warped theology, the apocalypse wasn't coming from outside forces. It was a moral cleansing that had to be triggered by voluntary sacrifice. In other words, his followers didn't just await the end of the world. They were taught to help usher it in. And so, deep inside the Shakahola forest, removed from the laws of man and mercy, the faithful waited. They starved and they died, all for a promise that was nothing more than a lie, delivered by a man who crowned himself the sole interpreter of God's will and whose vision of paradise came with a grave dug first.
Why is it never good, by the way?
Like a good cult?
What? Yeah, why isn't it like, hey guys, listen, here's the rules of the cult.
Because that would be like a voluntary club. I think the nature of a cult
God
is
loves you.
Mind control and manipulation and abuse.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think what you're talking about is like regular church.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Oh, they actually do have cults like that.
Yeah, you go every Sunday.
Yeah.
The mandatory starvation order that Mackenzie placed on his devotees was a brilliant tactic when you think about it. It stripped people of their strength, their will, their critical thinking, and their ability to resist. And more importantly, it stripped them of time. Starvation dulls the mind, it collapses reason, it weakens the body until you are no longer a thinker, no longer autonomous. You are just a vessel, desperate for meaning in your suffering.
I would like to offer a substitute word for brilliant.
Sure.
Diabolical.
Very good.
Yeah, brilliant does not work for me with these kind of people.
Potato, potato. But yes, I agree with you on that. Words matter. So yes. I'm just saying it was a brilliant it was efficient. It was diabolical.
Yeah. But efficient as well, because hunger changes things like within days.
But that's my point about fasting for spirituality. You lose it. You lose your mind. But anyway,
I don't think so.
Maybe that's the state of mind you need to be in to
I'm talking
spiritually
like
connect.
3 days.
I know, I'm still not behind it. But I do understand, though, intellectually what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in the state, it's easy to believe that suffering is holy, that your pain has purpose, that Mackenzie's voice is the only one worth listening to because it's the only one you still have the strength to hear. By the time death started crawling into their bodies, most of his followers were not questioning if salvation was real. They were begging for it. The starvation wasn't a side effect of the cult. It was the whole point. It was the slow, deliberate murder of doubt.
Crazy.
You might be wondering, who would willingly choose to die this way? Because it's easy to assume that it was only the uneducated or the easily misled or the quote-unquote simple-minded. But in reality, Mackenzie lured in intelligent, capable individuals, social workers, flight attendants, accountants, government employees, even paramilitary officers. They were not quote-unquote foolish, but they were vulnerable, lonely, grieving, searching for meaning, ripe for someone to step in and offer purpose wrapped in promises of salvation. Some of them were facing poverty, and by the time they realized that they were trapped, it was already too late. Let's now talk about the beginning of the end. And I don't mean end times, I mean the end of whack job Paul Mackenzie.
Yeah, please.
In February 2023, a group of starving women, one of them pregnant and recently raped, her name was Remy, attempted a desperate escape from the cult's grip. Emaciated but determined, they had spent days quietly observing the patterns and patrol routes of Paul Mackenzie and his enforcers. Remy, needing strength for both herself and the life inside her, survived on wild dates scavenged from the forest floor and secretly ingested. Most of the women were so severely malnourished that they could barely walk. Some of them couldn't do more than cry. Still, they moved under cover of night and collapsed beneath trees to rest during the days.
Wow.
Knowing the denser forest lie to the west and offered better cover, they followed the setting sun. The women scooped filthy water from shallow, stagnant pits with trembling hands to stay alive. And because Shakahola borders a national park, they also had to avoid the hungry eyes of predators, lions, hyenas, leopards, all while praying they wouldn't be dragged back to something worse. On the fourth day of their grueling escape, the women finally reached a road and managed to flag down a passing car, which brought them to a nearby village. "We broke down and started crying," recalled one of the women named Ya. The villagers gave them clean water, food, and perhaps most importantly, a moment of safety and the opportunity to usher in real help. Activists from the Malindi Community Human Rights Center escorted these brave women back to Malindi. Now, at first, the women stayed silent about the starvation orders and the strangulations. Ya, still terrified, believed Paul Mackenzie might still find them and have them killed if she spoke.
Yeah, of course.
They even clung to some vestige of faith in him and felt compelled to protect him, which is like a bit of Stockholm Syndrome, it would seem.
Sure, yeah.
But they did tell somebody named Kauro, a representative from the Rights Center, that sexual violence was happening deep in the forest. And that sliver of truth, buried under trauma and fear and them not really revealing too much of anything else, would become the first crack in Mackenzie's empire that would finally lead to his takedown. Because the following month, in March 2023, a group of villagers, about 200 of them, entered the forest to investigate the growing rumors. However, their search was violently cut short when Mackenzie's armed enforcers ambushed them with machetes and homemade bows, slashing tires and setting motorbikes ablaze. The villagers were forced to flee for their lives and sprinted nearly 2 miles back to safety, empty-handed and shaken, passing emaciated children tied to trees in their wake.
Oh, my God.
But in the final days of March, the law finally knocked on Paul Mackenzie's door. Police stormed his home and took him into custody, only for him to walk free on bail, smirking in the shadow of his crumbling empire. But thankfully, the reprieve was short-lived because by April, the state struck back with force, and dozens of heavily armed officers descended on Shakahola in full-scale raid, rifles raised and boots pounding, ready to rip the veil off the forest of death.
You slipped on a word, but it worked because you said heavenly armed, but I'd like to leave it.
Pun intended, would I say, or no? No, slip of tongue, but like in a good way.
Yes.
Haki Africa, so Haki Africa, a Mombasa-based human rights organization, was amongst the first in terms of the first responders. Some of the cult members, the true believers, quote unquote, heard the raid approaching and fled deeper into the forest, vanishing into the trees like ghosts.
Wow.
Others were too far gone, emaciated, barely clinging to life. Many sobbed as they were being extracted from the forest and insisted that they were being robbed of the chance to meet Jesus.
Yeah.
Some of the first responders at this point started lying to the people and saying that Jesus sent them just to get them out.
Do what you got to do, yeah.
Interestingly, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's the one I'm going with. At least 65 of the people rescued from the forest were charged with which of the following crimes?
Ooh.
Pop quiz. A, trespassing on private land. B, false imprisonment of forcing children to remain there. C, attempted suicide for refusing to eat.
C.
Yes. Yo, you are crushing. You are crushing this episode. Attempted suicide. So this is wild. At the time of this big raid and their arrests, criminal law stated that, quote, any person who attempts to kill himself is guilty of a misdemeanor and is subject to imprisonment of up to 2 years, a fine, or both, end quote, with the minimum age of prosecution for the offense set at 8 years old.
Wow.
However, a Kenyan judge has declared that the criminalization of attempted suicide is unconstitutional. And in a landmark ruling in January of 2025, which was like a second ago, Judge Lawrence Mugambi of the country's high court stated that it contradicts the Constitution by punishing those with mental health issues over which they may have little or no control.
Yeah, how about like a hug instead of jail time?
That's where the judge was at, and that's where they are now legally on the matter.
for the last 3 months.
Yeah, really, though. Isn't that crazy? Nearly 450 bodies have been recovered from Shakahola so far. I believe the exact number at the time of this recording is 429. Mostly women and children, and many more are likely still buried. The government hasn't released a death toll, but a worker at the site has estimated that hundreds more still remain. Some bodies, according to eyewitnesses and police, as I mentioned in the intro, were missing kidneys, eyes, and genitals.
Were they eating them?
Well, while officials have downplayed claims of organ harvesting and trafficking, internal affidavits and sources close to the investigation suggest that this may have been a coordinated operation, with one officer alleging nearly half of the corpses that he examined were missing organs.
Wow.
There are, tragically and heartbreakingly, hundreds of stories, each one a life that mattered, each one deserving to be remembered. I can't share them all right here, right now, but there is one in particular that, to me, captures the full weight of this horror, one that lays bare the true scale of the devastation. So I'm going to tell that story. But let this story represent all of the ones that I can't tell right now. Bahati Joan entered the forest in 2021 while pregnant, lured by promises of salvation, and never made it out. She perished there alongside all 6 of her children: Helen, age 9, Samuel, 7, Jacob, 3, Lillian, 18 months, Angelina, 7 months, and her newborn son, whose life lasted only days after being born. According to survivor accounts, the baby was breastfed once before being deliberately suffocated to death.
God.
Bahati's husband, Stephen, never stepped foot into the forest. Instead, he spent those agonizing years outside, desperately trying to save his family from a fate that they couldn't see coming. None of their bodies have been officially identified on what is now referred to as the Shakahola massacre.
This poor guy. Whole family's gone.
Oh my God. And he knew it was happening, and he tried to get them out, and he couldn't.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even have their bodies to bury. As of May 2025, Paul McKenzie remains in police custody, which obviously is the time of this recording. The trial, which began in July 2024, had been adjourned several times due to various reasons, including the unavailability of prosecutors. Paul McKenzie rightly faces multiple serious charges, including murder, specifically the deaths of 191 children, manslaughter in connection with the deaths of over 400 followers, child torture and cruelty, terrorism, and organized crime. His church has been designated as an organized criminal group by the Kenyan government. McKenzie, along with 93 other defendants, including his top associates and some of his followers, have denied the manslaughter allegations and pleaded not guilty at the start of the trial. When asked about the accusations that followers of his cult starved themselves and their children as well, following his orders, Paul McKenzie said that he, quote, had never seen anybody starve. The case before you, Your Honor, is not just for a trial, but for a reckoning, said Betty Rubia, one of the prosecutors. And the presiding judge, by the way, to whom the prosecution delivered that statement, as well as a million other statements, is Honorable Alex Etuku. Okay, that's who's hearing the case. The prosecutor went on to say that this case is, quote, about the exploitation of faith, the erosion of humanity, and the chilling cost of blind devotion, end quote. As witnesses arrived for various court proceedings, security officers, some carrying guns, stood shoulder to shoulder to prevent the suspects from seeing them. Prosecutors said that they lined up 90 witnesses, including minors, to take the stand in the case. Among them are 13 anonymous witnesses referred to only by their initials and whose voices were beamed from a speaker atop the enclosed witness booth. In Kenya, the death penalty was abolished in 2017, and so the maximum sentence for murder is life imprisonment. Therefore, if convicted, McKenzie will only be facing life in prison. The severity of the charges, particularly the murder of children and the scale of the deaths, suggest that the court may impose, and probably will, and definitely should, the maximum sentence.
Or just make an exception and kill him.
Could also consider doing that. The trial is ongoing, and the final verdict will depend on the evidence presented and the court's assessment of his role in the tragedy. Families searching for their loved ones say that they sought help from law enforcement months, years before the takedown, but in vain. Local community members who were suspicious about the activities in the forest also filed numerous reports with the police, who failed to follow up or investigate. Human rights groups also criticized law enforcement for not monitoring Paul McKenzie, who was arrested so many times before this, and at what point was even charged with radicalization and promoting extreme beliefs. As indicated by Khalid Hussein, who's the director of Haki Africa, the group that I mentioned earlier who helped expose the cult and was amongst the first responders, Khalid said, quote, "Without a doubt, I can say definitely, had the police responded sooner, then lives would have been saved. I feel as a country we have failed these Kenyans." This is not just a story about a madman with a Bible. It's about how absolute belief, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a weapon, sharper than any machete, deadlier than any bullet. A weapon that, in this case, slaughtered entire families, erased entire villages, and buried over 400 souls in shallow, unmarked graves, many of them being children. Paul McKenzie didn't just preach, he orchestrated a slow, ritualistic genocide wrapped in the language of salvation. He didn't lead a ministry, he ran a death cult. Paul Mackenzie's legacy isn't only measured by the victims who tragically died, but also by the many others who came dangerously close to dying under his influence and remain haunted, silent, or ashamed. This is not just about religious extremism. It's about grief, isolation, and the human desperation to find meaning in chaos. And how, when someone comes along offering answers, offering God, many people will blindly follow, even into the grave. The real horror isn't that one man believed the world was ending. It's that he convinced hundreds to die for it, starve for it, kill for it, bury their own children for it. True evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it stands in pulpits, wears a cross or any other religious symbol, and promises heaven while delivering hell. And when blind faith meets unchecked power, the result is not salvation, it's death on a massive scale. It's not miracle, not a movement, just a massacre disguised as a message from God, a cult wrapped in scripture, and a slaughter disguised as faith. And that's the case.
That alliteration at the end was unbelievable. But I believe.
Yep.
I have faith.
Yep.
I have faith in your writing ability.
Yeah, this case is... It's insane that it just happened too.
Yeah. Why?
I know that they intentionally took themselves off the radar. And I know not everyone everywhere can do everything for everyone everywhere else. But I just can't believe that this went on for so many years on such a catastrophic, massive scale to a point where hundreds of people were burying their children. And it went on and on and on. And he was arrested and law enforcement turned a blind eye for so long in Kenya. I don't know. It's just too tragic to even believe that it happened minutes ago.
Yeah, you know what? So there's this idea that obviously the world we live in is the world. But the world, like the country we live in is not even the country we live in. Like everyone is having different experiences everywhere. I remember hearing this fact, right? And being like, what? How is that even possible? It's 2025. Things should be this or that. Or from what I see, they're this or that. There are more people enslaved today than at any other time in history.
You have talked about that before. It's mind-blowing.
It's just a world we don't live in, so we don't see it. But let it not be lost that those people who are enslaved right now are fully having that experience.
Seeing it and feeling it.
In real life.
I guess that's my point, that we don't know everything that's going on. That we have...
not even fucking close.
I know.
Not even fucking
I think
close.
Maybe that's why this case hit, because it really highlights what a bubble so many of us are lucky enough to live in. It's one thing that it went on. It's like a whole other thing to me for some reason that I didn't even know about it until I knew about it. Do you know what I mean?
Is so big. It's good. And that's the way it goes with everything, by the way, which is why people become very uppity about things they find out about on the internet. Not you, but it's like, how do people not know that this, I can't know everything.
Yeah.
I cannot know everything. The second I hear something and I know it, now I know it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't I'm not omniscient. Nobody's fucking omniscient, nor should they be.
Right.
It's pretty close, though, with all the access we have to information on the internet. We're not supposed to know about all this.
Yeah. I know. I know. Anyway, thank you for sticking it out. I know it was a tough case. I know you're not feeling well. But I know I took us into this case because you needed a minute. Do you think you can take us out of it with a titty?
Of course.
Great.
Okay. Are you ready?
I think so.
You're fucking not ready. There's no way. This is going to hurt you so much. You're possibly going to have an existential breakdown.
I can't fucking breathe.
The moment.
All right, go.
Okay. So there's this idea that's been floated around recently, and I'm sure it's been around forever, but this idea that however many people have ever seen you in your entire life, that's how many versions of you there are out there.
Well, this version's having a panic attack. The one right in front of you.
So no two people share the same version of you in their own head. And most importantly, you have a very different version of yourself than literally every single person, everyone else does.
That I'm certain of.
So I saw this thing yesterday and I didn't get it at first, but when I got it, I was like, what? It took me a while. I almost had a breakdown, so I know you're definitely going to.
Yay!
The thought is that there is no universal now. Like, it doesn't exist.
Because everybody's now is different.
The now you're experiencing right now is the future to somebody who lived in the past, and it's the past to somebody born after this moment.
Are you talking about parallel universes?
No.
Oh.
No, that's like a little heady and out there. This is just like a fact. Oh my
shit.
God. To someone born in 2036, this is the past for them. To someone who died in 1978, this was the unattainable future. But it's now for us.
Yep.
And it's like.
What do we do with that?
I don't know. I do know that I have a really hard time with the idea of living in the present moment.
Because it's gone.
Exactly. It's a fluid thing that's always moving. I'm not a deer. I'm sorry to say I have thoughts and I
can throw an apple at you if you want in your backyard.
I wish you would.
We could see how that works
I would not be so dumb as to run away from it. I'd be like, oh, they just threw an apple to us. They probably want us closer to the house.
Unless there's poison in it.
Exactly. Or they thought it was a grenade. But staying in reality is something that my brain works with.
Yeah.
In reality, there are no, you know what the best part about being in reality is for me right now that I'm just reveling in? Nobody's mad at me. Not one person is mad at me.
I don't get it.
When I exit reality and go into either outside of my immediate surroundings or into the future of the past, I know there's people on the internet right now that are mad at me, but they're not in my reality right now. I don't see them until I log on. So if I stay in reality and not in fantasy, it's just much more manageable to live that way, because the second you depart from reality and you're in fantasy, and that fantasy has a positive connotation, I'm just using the word fantasy as anything that's not reality, the actual laws of the universe don't exist. So you're fully untethered.
Untethered soul.
Untethered soul. Anything could happen in fantasy. You could fly in fantasy. You can fly in reality. That's not
exactly
what I'm talking
right.
about. But I'm saying the laws of physics for other people do not exist. So the second you leave reality and enter into fantasy, you're just gone. So I've been trying to stay grounded
in reality
as much as possible. Yeah, as often as I remember to do it. And that works with my brain. But there is no now.
God damn you, Tink. There's no now. Not even now is now. Now is not now.
It's like that scene from Spaceballs.
Yes. Say it again. What's the line?
Well, it goes on for 2 minutes, but when will then be now?
That's it.
Soon.
Exactly.
Just missed it. When? Just now. Just passed.
Oh, that's creepy and awesome, but also makes you think, but not think too much.
There is no now. There is no you. We only have reality.
And the universe is cool.
Exactly.
Cool.
What is she doing here? She never leaves Paris.
Thank you for that, Tate.
All right.
I enjoyed it. It did take me out of my headspace. It gave me a small panic attack, but it took me out of the starvation cult. So thank you for that.
Whatever works. Thanks for doing all that hard work. I'm sure it must have been tough to research all of that and deal with that on a however many hours, days, weeks long basis it took you.
Mind-blowing stuff. But but I love reporting this, and I don't love what I am reporting, but the act of reporting it hopefully our listeners, we got to think of a better way to say enjoyed this.
Yeah.
But you guys know what we're saying. We loved having you here with us. Thank you very much for being here. Exactly. Yeah. From start to finish, if you're still here, you are a real one.
Yes, you are.
And what else, Tank?
We will see them at the next episode.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.